With the launch of the Shadowlands, there was hope for loot. Hope that without having to worry about Titan forging, corruption forging, or other random systems, we could get back to gearing our characters and cut off some of that RNG nonsense. Then came the loot drop nerfs. Originally, Castle Nathria was dropping too much loot, according to Blizzard. When this was exactly, I don't know, as I've never experienced too much loot in that particular raid. Neither have any of my guildies. In addition, Mythic Plus loot was nerfed in two ways. The first being the max level you could get out of Mythic Plus being 3 levels below Heroic Raid, and the reduction of loot on a failed key, down from 2 pieces to 1. So having set all that up, it's time to fix PvE gearing. 1. Can I copy your homework? In the Shadowlands, there's a wonderful system for reliable, albeit just a little slower than random luck in some cases, gearing, and that's PvP. PvP finally has vendors again, and even more so, they have an upgrade system, so that piece of gear you got when it was unranked can be upgraded with honor after you reach a certain rating. This makes the piece that you buy mean something, as your stat priority is not going to change mid-patch. So once you have your Haste Mastery Sword, for example, all you need to do is upgrade the item level by giving it currency, and you get more of what you want. So the real question is, why can't PvE just have a similar system? We've had similar systems before, like badges, points, coins, and the like. Allow for weapons and armor to be purchased using currency gained via completing PvE content. So dungeons, raids, I guess Warfronts if they have another equivalent, islands if they have another equivalent, some expansion feature thing. Give us currency. As the content goes up in difficulty, give us more currency. For powerful upgrades, have a second currency analogous to Conquest that has a weekly cap. That way you can prevent people from saying, oh, but we farmed everything in 1 week and now there's no content. Like, yeah, you played for 160 hours. Of course there's no more content for right now. And finally, once you run the content high enough, at a difficulty level, let's say killing the boss on the next tier of difficulty, or stepping up a level in Mythic Plus, you can then unlock the ability to purchase gear of that level on that character. Seems simple and player-friendly in my opinion. Plus, since it's done per character, that means that character actually had to run the content and be good enough to get through it, or at least be carried. And we'll do a video on carrying, and I guess, for example, carry culture later. Carrying has always existed, will always exist, and has always been a massive problem, depending on how you want to define the terms. But ultimately, with harder content being released each expansion, you need more coordinated efforts and a higher skill floor in order to complete it. We'll do a video on that later. But again, simple, player-friendly, everybody wins. It's a good idea. 2. But what about the loot drop? It is time to address the lucky Johnnies in our game. Now, we all know a lucky Johnny who seems to get that new weapon as the first drop or the trinket you were farming on their first run. For them, this system is working just fine. They don't see a problem with it. They kill boss, shiny thing drops, they get shiny thing, DPS, HPS, or mitigation goes up. Johnny's happy. Now, back to reality for the rest of us plebeians down here in the muck trying to scrape for gear and being like, please, sir, may I please have a scrap of item level and stats that are important? After all, I always get versatility mastery gear and it's terrible. Give me haste mastery or mastery haste. Either or. And if we go to a deterministic system of gearing, these lucky Johnnies, they're going to be like, but I have to run content X number of times in order to get Y item. Here's the twist, Johnny. Just for you. Under the system that I proposed earlier in the video, we'll still have loot drops in the content. So there's a chance that you can get that awesome weapon from your dungeons or your raids, as opposed to having to buy it. This is also known as a win-win. And for the rest of us, mere mortals, we may just have to settle for currency and the occasional blessing of RNGesus bestowing an item that we actually want upon us. Again, it's a win-win. 3. The march of progress. Time and time again, I hear the phrase, gear doesn't matter, it's just a means to an end. And while in some respects that's true, there is also an adage, what gets rewarded gets done. So check it out. A lot of us play this game for fun, and some of us play this game for a challenge. That challenge can be self-determined, or it can be clearing raids, PvP, dungeons, or even the idea of throwing yourself against the dark forces of RNG for mount farming and collectibles. After all, you gotta pull that slot machine, and what easier way to pull that slot machine than to kill the monster, take its arm, pull it, and say, hey, give me the mount. It doesn't drop and you're upset, and you do it again. You do it again next week, because that's how this works. The idea that gear doesn't matter, though, is a ludicrous one, since it's the only real reward you get from doing content, and in turn, it might make doing content easier. There's a difference between player skill and inputs and player gear. One is completely controlled, and one is mostly random. With the proposed fixes and system that I've outlined, I'm trying to cut down on the random so that it comes back to player skill as opposed to, say, needing item level, secondary stats, things like that. If we remember, back in Legion and in BFA, you could play optimally. You could do all that you wanted. But gear would ultimately lock you out. We saw it with Fire Mages, we saw it with Twilight Devastation, we saw it with Warlocks and having the haste stack. Hell, I played a Paladin, I had like 70% haste a lot of the time. Visions of Perfection is a great example. Well, we'll be doing something on that a little later.
Look what they did to my boy. Look at it. God, I wish they'd fix you.
But the idea is that if we can normalize gear a little bit, or at least normalize the acquisition of gear, make it a little more deterministic, then it comes down to, all right, you and player X have roughly the same gear. You're both 218 item level, let's say. Now, why is player X 4K higher on the DPS than you? Well, there's got to be a reason. It's not gear. You both have the same gear, and that means that players can learn as opposed to having the easy answer, which is, if I only had X item, I would be great. And the answer is, no, odds are you're probably still terrible. Hell, I'm terrible. Sometimes, especially as an unholy DK. I just re-rolled. I'm working on it. But the answer is, it's player skill and inputs need to be separated from the idea of gear acquisition. Gear makes it easier to do the bosses. Player skill and inputs are what actually kills the bosses. The march of progress will go forward and forward and forward, and eventually you don't have to do every content right away, but most people like to do the content when it's out. Very few people want to go back and do the content outside of your transmog farmers, your mount collectors, your pet collectors, your toy collectors, so on and so forth. 4. The mindset of the devs. The community has many ideas to fix and or improve World of Warcraft, but they're not devs. So to wrap it up, it might be helpful to take an excerpt from an interview of a dev, specifically from PC Gamer and Ian Hazakostas. Now, before we do read that, I want to mention, I'm not a game dev. Odds are you're not a game dev if you're watching this. If you happen to be a World of Warcraft game dev and you're watching this for the love of all that's holy and the light, or the horde, or whatever you want to say, let me know in the comments below. Because honestly, I want to talk to you guys. I like what you do 90% of the time. There's just some things that need to be fixed, or something that the community has a perception about that needs to be corrected. I want to make the game as good as it possibly can. It's my favorite game. And the Paladin, Retribution Paladin, is my favorite class. More on that in another video. But back to Ian's idea. Now that the Shadowlands is out, are there any big pieces of feedback that you're working to address? Question from PC Gamer to Ian Hazakostas, lead game dev for World of Warcraft. His answer: we're humbled by the players' response to the Shadowlands, but we know that launching an expansion isn't an end for us, but rather a new beginning. The team is listening closely to the community as we look to shape future updates. One big topic of discussion has been the way loot works in the Shadowlands endgame. We significantly reduced the rate at which players earn item rewards, but at the same time also stripped away randomness and tried to give everyone more clear goals to pursue and control over their progress towards them. When it comes to PvP itemization specifically, we're really happy with how that's playing out, but we think we can do more to make the experience of running dungeons and raids feel more satisfying when you don't get a specific item you were hoping for. Otherwise, balance remains an ongoing focus, both through the hotfix adjustments to the live game and through more involved changes to player abilities, especially new Shadowlands systems like legendary items, covenants. Those will come in patches. All right, so having read that, he's aware. The dev team is aware that, guys, PvE gearing does not feel good. Help us. Help us play this, because I don't want a PvP to get PvE gear so that I can get into a dungeon so that maybe eventually I can replace it with trinkets and weapons of an appropriate level. I just want to do PvE. And I have sympathy for all of my PvP brethren and sistren and those that lie betwixt that had to do PvE to get good PvE gear or to be able to be competitive in PvP for so many years. I want you guys to keep the gear separate, acquisition if at all possible, and if you want to mix it, okay, fine. But I want all paths to be valid. Let's say you only like to play Battleground. Well, I don't want you to have to go run my raid, because you don't want to be there. You want to be in Battleground. I want you to be in the Battleground. And I want it to be commiserably based on effort and skill and rating, roughly the same rewarding. So there we go. My ideas for fixing PvE loot in Shadowlands. Now, did you have any other ideas? You think I'm completely wrong? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, of course, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and for the epic among you, there's always subscribing. Hint, hint. Additionally, I stream on Twitch Monday, Tuesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Saturday at 2 p.m. You'll find all the links in the down there part. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.